Welcome back to my channel, everybody. My name is Dr. John, and I'm here with a lovely interview with Dr. Sarah Moukhliss. She is from the University of North Florida and several other things that she does. I'm going to let her introduce herself in a second, but she is here to discuss adult learning from the vantage point of being an adult learner and then somebody who creates learning for adults. So thank you so much, Sarah, for being here. Why don't you tell everybody what you do?
Yeah, thank you so much, John. I am a STEM online learning librarian at the University of North Florida. I work with all students from undergraduate to doctoral candidates. My primary focus, though, is actually with our Brooks College of Health students and assisting them with advanced research on their health topics to get through master's programs and doctoral degrees. So I really thoroughly enjoy that on top of just providing one-shot instruction. But consults are really one of my favorite things with the students one-on-one.
So you're helping those graduate students. We can assume that they are adults and that they have things going on in their lives. For everybody who's watching, when we're talking about the concept of adults today, we're talking about people who are living that adult experience. So you probably have a job outside of school. You probably have a family and obligations. And so wanted to frame that adult terminology in everybody's brain. So you design that and you help them with their research, and you are that librarian resource to help them see how they can search for things and all of that fun stuff. But you also were an adult learner yourself, right?
Yes, I was in graduate school with you, getting our doctorate. So I was also on the other side, being a parent working full time, and also in the evenings trying to get through our graduate program. So when I work with students who are actually often full-time health professionals, I get it. I get how stressful it can be because you're trying to balance so much of work, family, getting your schoolwork done as well. And that can be a lot. So I feel like in that aspect, I can be empathetic because I experienced it too on my end.
Absolutely. And I tell people all the time, and you know my story, obviously we're very close. So you know that in higher education, I've been that adult learner because I've had that job and working overnights. And we've talked about this before, but when we create learning, especially in higher education, we're kind of stuck. Are we teaching pedagogy for the little K through 12 students, or are we treating them like adults? Because so many of our students at university have those adult qualities. And so you were talking about you had all these obligations and things that you had to do outside of school. So how did set up things like, how is that with you being an adult learner in a doctoral program?
I guess one positive was there were one or two faculty members that were very dedicated to our learning and wanted to see us succeed. But for the most part, though, if you recall, John, a lot of our Canvas course shells were always incomplete. Sometimes content wasn't really even in there except for the syllabus. A lot of times the syllabus was outdated and didn't even have the current semester information in it. And so it was very surprising that being in a curriculum and instruction program that we were sort of being thrown into courses that were not finished, and we didn't know our professor very well. And I remember getting a lot of anxiety each semester just trying to Google and see like names and faces of faculty members because I wasn't sure who we were working with or what their personality was like, because the courses that we engaged with were, I guess I'm being generous to say they were courses. They really weren't. You only know what you know at the time, right? I mean, later on after we left, I learned about quality matters and what a course really should look like through proper standards and how important teacher presence is in the classroom for all students and ages, to have that presence, especially in online. So, yeah, looking back, it's even more shocking that we went through a program to become exemplar designers, but didn't have that experience ourselves. I had it with one professor. She was an adjunct. Now, maybe it's because they were going through a whole program revamp and they were busy, but I'm not sure if that's really an excuse. I wouldn't be designing like that for my students.
Well, and I remember there were several times because we were all adult learners learning together. And there were several times I remember one class in particular where if you tell me that you're going to open up the weekly content at 8 a.m. in the morning on Monday, then I have planned my week around that. I have set a time aside for when I need to work on that stuff. And for me, that sometimes was Monday morning. And so if I have to email a professor and don't get a response for 2 or 3 days saying, oh, sorry, I didn't flip the switch to make it available, that's not honoring the adults' learning experience. That's not honoring people's lives outside of academia, which is why I'm so passionate. I know you're so passionate about when we create learning experiences, especially for adults, that we need to take into account their personal lives, what they've got going on, and their experiences when we're doing that. I will tell you, what we went through has taught us both through lots of non-examples, has showed us both how to take control of our own knowledge and how to seek out additional learning and how to that intrinsic motivation of being an adult learner. We are doing this in the field. We want to be the best that we can be. And if we're not getting that from one place, we seek out our knowledge with others. So no, and that's, when we talk about adult learners, the organization is super important. Understanding that probably firm due dates and big, huge structure like that's not going to be the best. And I don't know, I know that you also work with the Northwest Council for Computer Education, as do I. And so we get to go around the country and talk to educators around the world, all over. And so when you do that, you are always working with adults in that capacity. So what do you think of when you're working one-on-one with an adult, maybe not a graduate student, but an actual peer? What is that experience like when you're trying to coach them or provide assistance?
Well, I think it's really interesting because I see it sort of similarly as working with my younger college students because I do course design for just library information science 101. But I was thinking about how similar it is with just even going out to NCCE and giving support to other teaching colleagues. It's got to be very student-centric or person-centric. The person has to become vested in the learning. They have to take ownership of that learning. They need to know how empowered they are of the knowledge within. For example, when we went out and did teacher training with school library assistants, we wanted the teachers to model to their colleagues best practices. So it's not just us talking at them. We're teaching them how much they know and how empowering it is that they can be the coach and the modeler and also the one to step aside and to watch their newer colleagues become successful by learning with them. So whether it's even at NCCE or if it's with my online LIS 1001 class, I am a strong advocate of student-centered pedagogy. You have to take ownership. I give lots of options. What topic do you want to talk about as you learn how to research? They pick. What tool do you want to use? I provide tools for critically analyzing information, but I don't say you have to use this tool. I supply them with maybe 8 tools, and I say, what tool works for you? You pick and tell us why. I love when some of the students actually create new tools based on the other tools because they're not perfect. So whenever I design my course, it's very empowering that they pick pretty much, I supply a little bit, obviously, the knowledge that I have within of just have been a librarian for a long time, but they're empowered to pick and to learn from what they're interested in every step of the way until the final project. So I'm very student-centric, and I think you are too, John.
Yeah, well, and we've talked about this before too. Everything that we do, we want to make sure it's evidence-based and we're relying on science. And I've said this a million times before, science and understanding where adult learning started and where learning theory started, that is fantastic to know where we've been. But I'm a firm believer that as soon as the COVID-19 pandemic hit and we had that switch to remote learning and we've had so much trauma in this world, I think it kind of threw everything out of the window. I mean, when I look at high schoolers now in 2024, I don't know that they are the same kind of high schoolers that we had 20 years ago. And that's not a good or a bad thing, but they've been through so much traumatic events in such a short amount of time. At what point do we begin to equate them with that adult shared experience? If they are engaging with the outside world and having to learn about consequences, whether it's political or socioeconomical, and they have jobs like I did when I was 15. If we're going to afford these sort of flexibilities and these freedoms and these autonomy and choice for adults, I also feel like there is a space for that for our non-adults or our soon-to-be teenagers as well. It's obviously all tailored towards the students. You have to know your students, but I think when we look at learning in general, learning is that cyclical process for the entire spectrum of our life. From when time we're born to the time we die, we're going to be learning things. And so it is an organic method. You're going to learn regardless. If you go out and interact with anything in our world, you're going to learn. But in K through 12 and in higher education, we have to take that organic process and we have to make it fit into this tiny little box. And I think a lot of people get uncomfortable with unwrapping that box. But I think some of those adult learning principles of honoring their lived experience and knowing that they've got stuff going on outside of them and asking them choice and giving them voice. I think that we could use some splashes of that in K through 12 and non-adults as well. So
I agree. And I think maybe that's why we're similar, because we do come from the K through 12 background and now we're in academia. But a lot of what works in K through 12 also works with our adult students, just maybe developmentally different. But of course, we're more of an engaged learner if we have ownership to that and we pick something or we know we want to learn it because it's something that excites us. And, I love the idea of choice boards, and you have obviously objectives that are aligned with your content, but there's many different ways throughout the learning process to show that you have accomplished a certain goal and to allow flexibility for those different types of learners to be able to choose between different final projects to show what they know and not to be so cookie cutter, because our program too was pretty cookie cutter, and I think a lot of our, especially more traditional programs that's been around for a while. So, no diss on one, program over the other. It just is what it is. But if we could maybe experiment more as educators and realize whether it works or not, we are learning best practices as the educator. I think sometimes, at least in my job, there's this terror of failing. Like, what happens if I do this and I fail at it as a teacher? We're all human. And I even tell all my students when I meet with them, I'm a lifelong learner too. And I'm learning with you. So I'm your advocate when we are in class. I'm not the sage on the stage. I'm with you, learning with you. And I really like, in my context, that they become their own subject matter experts and they learn that. I'm like, oh, wow, that is interesting, because I do not know anything about fishing for this type of fish, because one student wanted to do that type of research one semester. Another one wanted, it's just so fascinating what they pick. Hedgehogs is a semester, so that's cool too. But lots of really cool topics that I would never think to explore that my students are exploring. And I'm a new learner with them, but I obviously can provide the framework for the next step as they learn to research.
So if you were asked today to develop maybe let's do an hour-long training session for adult learners, let's say for librarians or for something like that, you're probably going to design that in a little bit different way than you would at the university or when you were in K through 12 library space. So can you walk us through what are some different considerations that you would make knowing that your audience is going to be adults versus non-adults?
Well, adults will have a very, very rich background and experiences, but whether they have attended college or just through life's experiences, they bring so much richness and experience to the table. When they arrive, they're not as new. So you kind of have to gauge with them, where are you at in your professional learning experience? Because you don't need to start at the beginning necessarily. So there should be some getting to know you activities, or you should understand your audience before you even walk in to provide instruction. If it's a 1 hour session, I would assume you have an objective, and you stay focused on that objective, so you don't have to give the whole history of libraries and its story. So it's going to be much more focused on what I'm going to need to learn to take back to my work tomorrow, and for it to be effective, because that's a lot of times that's why we're doing professional development, is we want to make sure it's impactful tomorrow, what we teach today, rather than in academia, it's just it might not necessarily mean that much tomorrow. Eventually it will, but you have to think about what I'm presenting now. How is it the most impactful? And is what you need to have your objectives tied down? What is our goal today? Who's my audience? You really do have to know. And how can I present it? And what type of learners do I have in my audience? And how can I make sure that we present the targeted learning materials in a variety of ways? And a lot of adults need time to talk to other adults about their experiences, because I don't know about you, John, but whenever I sit through professional development back in the day, I learned the most from my peers, not from the person up doing the presentation. So that person who's orchestrating the workshop or the special day really needs to think their learning goal is for that day in that workshop.
Exactly. Well, we adults are stubborn. Adults, I'm grown. I'm going to do what I want. And so no matter what, even if their employer says you have to go to this training, it doesn't mean they have to go to this training or this development session with a smile on their face or actively engage. It's just ticking off another thing in their box. But you were telling me you were out recently in Gallup, New Mexico. You are working with some teachers out there. Gallup, New Mexico is a fantastic school district out there in rural New Mexico. I've been there several times. Sarah has started going out there. And when we go there, we get to work with Indigenous educators, and we get to really help a community with what they need. And Sarah was telling me this story about how our organization, Northwest Council for Computer Education, was there providing support. And when we go out and provide support, we are teachers first. We're all practicing educators. This is something we all do on the side. So we're always coming in immediately, not with a consultant mindset, but we're coming in with, I am your team teacher. What's going on? What can I help you with? Sarah, you were telling me that you helped one specific teacher with something that they were asking with specifically. And you may not have thought that, I didn't think I was going to come here to do that today, but you did it anyways because that's what the teacher needed. And there was another organization in that school district who is very gung-ho about, this is what I'm supposed to be here to teach you today, and you need to listen and do it my way. And I just think when you are an adult, that is the wrong way to approach any sort of learning activity. If you get mandated something, your walls are immediately going up because you pay your rent, you put food on your kid's table, you pay the mortgage. Like, why are you telling me what I need to do? So I think if we can remove that cognitive dissonance between, oh, I am an adult, but I'm still having this person saying I need to learn this, or I've got more growth to do. If we can involve them in that conversation and we can honor their lived experiences and kind of put our needs aside and say, this is where we want everybody to go. Where are you at? And how can we get you closer to the end goal? I think you get much better outcomes.
And I agree with one teacher. I think about myself. How do I feel when somebody comes into my space and wants to tell me how to do it better or how to do it differently? And I probably take on that same temperament, like I'm fine, or I don't know if I want you here. But yeah, just connecting as people is so much more, it's important to form some sort of initial relationship beyond just I'm here to give you instruction, goodbye. I felt like I made a real connection with one of the language teachers because I thanked her. She teaches Navajo language to children, and I just said, I think what you are doing is so important and so invaluable. My husband is a Moroccan indigenous tribal member of his country, and he's older, but when he was a child, it was illegal for him to learn his language in school. So he is illiterate. He cannot read his native tongue. He can only speak it. And obviously he can speak the colonized languages just fine and read, but that was very intentional to remove him from his culture. And I think once I shared that story with her, I felt like we were able to connect a little bit more deeply. And I hope she realizes that, yeah, I'm here as a human too with experiences. I'm vested in wanting to know how I can help you do continue to grow and do great things for your community because it's so essential. So I hope that story was helpful when we got to know each other, because it was very meaningful for me to be able to share that with her.
I love that. And I'm sure it was very meaningful for her. I always feel like whenever we go out to Gallup, when we leave, we're like, feel like we made a little bit of a difference. We helped somebody out and even if that was them not feeling so isolated and alone in this world of teaching that we live in. So just having that support system, I'm sure she was very, very grateful for that. So we talked about a lot of stuff. We talked about your experience as a student, about how you design learning and support for adult learners as part of NCCE and at the University of North Florida. Why don't you go ahead and tell everybody where they can connect with you professionally? I know that you recently published a wonderful and groundbreaking new study on a new version of our library guides that we use that is a little bit more impactful. So why don't you tell everybody a little bit where they can connect with you, learn more about your research, and then we can sign it off.
Sure. You can find me on LinkedIn. There's not too many Sarah Mouklisses out there. So SarahMoukhliss. If you want to learn about my study that I conducted, I created a rubric called the LGAS rubric. It is an evaluative tool for something called a library guide, which are pathfinders that librarians design in the K through 12 through academia. We weren't really student-centered, and we didn't think about pedagogy as we designed these. So my tool is a remix to bring student centricity and pedagogy to the forefront of designing library. So you're more than welcome to Google LGAS rubric and lead pipe, and you'll find it. And I would love to connect and to hear what you think about this new tool. I'm very excited. I have gotten connections with librarians throughout the United States who are considering using it or already adapting it. So I'm just very proud and excited for that.
Awesome. And I'm going to put all the links to the LGAS and to the study and to connections with Sarah in the link below in the comments. So make sure you grab those. Thank you so much, Dr. Moukhliss, for coming and talking about adult learning. For all of you who've been watching, thanks for tuning in. Make sure to like and subscribe before you head out. There's going to be more content coming about learning theories, behaviorism, cognitivism, all of the isms. So make sure to like and subscribe. Come back again soon for the next installment, and we will see you soon.